Wright himself was a big movie fan. In fact, at both of the branches of Taliesin, both the one in Wisconsin and the one in Arizona, he actually had movie theaters.
Frank Lloyd Wright also walked around at times with a movie camera. And there is film of the Larkin building in Buffalo, New York, Larkin Soap, the only film we have of it that was actually shot by Frank Lloyd Wright himself.
I think creation can only provide a way for objective criticism, that there's more things to reference. If three people made a film about Starlight Theater, then we would have a better conversation about what we missed doing it.
Right. You mentioned Jeannie Gang's Starlight Theater in Rockford, Illinois. And at intermission, the roof opens up like a flower. And Mike has a beautiful film of this, Spirit of Space, his film. But when you're actually in that space and it opens up, you know, your spirit goes with it. That happens somewhat with the film. But the temperature changes, the weight of your body changes with the difference in ceiling height. I could go on and on with phenomenological effects that change when this heavy weight above you is released. Yeah. Is there any way to capture something like that in film?
No.
And the second question is, when you said Jeannie loved the film and everybody, so now are architects, do they have to design buildings that have moving parts so you can film them?
When we went out to the set to make a storyboard for the film, we were lucky we paralleled with a client meeting that she was going to pitch another theater for. And that's the exact reason why we were hired to do that. Everyone knows how to watch a film. And within that framework, you can very effectively communicate ideas that you can't pinpoint. When you watch a film, you have an experience, you committed to watch it for 2 to 5 minutes, and it's done. And then you kind of have a basis to have a discussion. And that's the reason we're doing our films, not to try to compete with the experience of architecture and greatness, but just to be real and say, we're just trying to help communicate architecture for the betterment of architecture.
Yeah. Lee, what's the difference between films about architecture and stills about architecture?
All film and using digital photography, calling it film, is kind of a fiction in a way, right? I mean, the building doesn't really look like that, and often you're creating a mood. I was shooting Michael Reese Hospital. The hospital on the south side is being demolished, and I purposely shot it for the blog in black and white. And I wanted it to look sad. I wanted it to look like a wounded thing sort of sitting out there. So I shot it with a wide-angle lens underneath this giant sky and this sort of hospital that gave so much help and succor to so many is now in need of help and isn't getting it. And and the text said that, but I want the photograph to say that too. If you go by and look at it now, you got to stare through a fence, and it doesn't look probably as dramatic, but it's a way of creating a mood.
Architecture is an art form, film is an art form. They're in competition. We wouldn't think it would appropriate if we asked the question, what film captures the brilliance of literature, for example? Or in other words, because anything that's going to be an adaptation of a literary work is going to be a transmogrification.
Yes.
And it's not, you can't capture it. You're doing something else with it. It's interesting that Wright himself tended to not like or have even spaces in his home for paintings or sculpture because he didn't want things competing with the architecture.
Yeah.
And I think that that part of the problem is to see what film does when it's serving its own interests, whether it's narrative or non-narrative, is creating space and creating things with space, which of course architecture also does. But they go about it in different ways, and therefore it would be almost strange if those two projects became compatible at some point, because they're really different art forms.
Yeah. We just got out of the film screening with Phyllis Lambert of what she did for architectural photography, and what she wrote in 1958, a document about how profound architectural photography was for representing architecture. They were having the same discussions about should architectural photography represent architecture. It's not appropriate. People don't understand when they can just take a picture of it. They don't have to draw it. They don't have to understand what it's like to be in that building. And that conversation is exactly happening right now.
So let me push back just a little bit and say that I feel that this changes architectural production, that architecture then gets built to look a certain way in the image. And I think film does the same thing. There's so many films about cities. Cities kind of become sets for architecture. Any of you, your thoughts on that?
I think architectural photographers are hunters and architectural filmmakers are more like bird watchers. And both art forms, you know, the architectural photographer goes out there, he's following the tracks, he's out there to catch it in an instant, like the shoot. And the bird watcher waits like a whole day, watches people move in and out, and then looks back and has something. And neither one of those people can change the animal that they're going to be hunting in the future, or a new bird that exists in a different territory. So all it is a methodology. So there's no way can I say that this methodology will change architects how to build.
What often happens is that there is a relationship between what gets photographed and what gets built later, but the missing step is what a building is photographed. Those photographs go before committees that give architecture awards. They see those photographs, not necessarily the building. That building gets the medal from the AIA or what have you, the award from the AIA. And then others see those photographs and then kind of copy what's
That's
there,
what
copy
I need.
what's awarded.
Both film and architecture are arts that absorb other arts. Architecture is painting, is sculpture, is and so on. One of my favorite filmmakers, Nicholas Ray, was with the first group of apprentices to Wright, and the first group of Taliesin. And he said what he learned from Wright, more than anything else, was a respect for the horizontal line. And this is very clear if you look at any of Nicholas Ray's films in CinemaScope. He's one of the absolute masters of CinemaScope and composing with a horizontal line. I grew up in a CinemaScope house. The house that I'm in, that I grew up in, is like a CinemaScope frame. And so it seems to me that those kind of compatibilities one can talk about because there's something shared by, in terms of composition, for example.
Yeah.
Tom Piper, who made the Aqua Tower video for Jeannie Gang, said that we collaborated and used some footage there, but he said that he had people comment that said, I saw this film, I went out and saw the tower, and I love that tower. Like, I will show people when they come and visit me in Chicago. So that will affect people's life, that someone might see a film out of town, and they'll remember to make a stop in Chicago and have that kind of deja vu experience. They remember a couple images in a sequence of the film, and then they'll go and experience it more.
But this happens even on the most mundane level. Think about the fact of what King Kong did for the Empire State Building. Just for starters, it's